everyone, and welcome back to Too Cool for Middle School. It's not the end of the calendar year, but it's kind of the end of the school year for most teachers, and we're about midway through 2023. And I love when people do like mid-year best and worst videos. So today we're going to talk about some of my favorite books of 2023 so far and some of my least favorite. And maybe in the comments down below you can give me some recommendations for other ones that I might like that are like my favorite books, and just kind of see what we come up with. So just to check in with you a little bit, it is the end of June. Our school year is over, but I've been teaching for like a summer program type of thing. It's not really true summer school. It's not run by my school, but it's like a summer educational program. So it's fairly low key. I'm teaching like intro to 6th grade English and public speaking. It's still like a pretty long day. I teach from about 9 to 3. I love the 9 o'clock start time. Like some teachers get there at 8 and do a class that starts at 8, but mine doesn't start until 9, and I absolutely love it. I wish that everything would start at 9 a.m. I'm not a morning person. I don't like waking up super early. So that little bit of sleeping in time has been really nice. And then my 1-year-old just still has to be in daycare. We can't take her out for the summer, so that's kind of why I'm doing this summer program, so that I can continue to pay for her very expensive daycare. And then my 7-year-old, I've just been able to send him to kind of like different camps throughout the summer. Some weeks he just stays home and binge watches The Flash on Netflix. But you know, we all need weeks like that, so I'm trying not to be too strict with him about being super accomplished over the summer, you know? I'm just trying to kind of let him sample some different types of camps. He's gonna do a YouTuber camp actually in a couple weeks, so I'll let you know how that goes. And when we finally get a little bit of time off, maybe we can do a little vlogging. Mariah is so much fun right now. She's like almost a year and a half, so I need to get more footage of her. Oh, and then the other big thing is that we had our first round of the Brave History Conference in June, and it went so well. It was so cool to see so many of you in the Zoom meeting and in the chat, and then we had like breakout rooms and stuff, and all of the sessions were really, really good. I learned a ton from the other presenters, and I was just really proud of the information that we were able to provide in just, you know, like it was kind of like a half day, maybe like a 3/4 of a day conference online. There's, you know, it's just very, very hard to put on conferences, and we were trying to do it in the most like accessible way possible, and it ended up being really fun. So we're gonna do another one in August, so I'll put the link to sign up down below. August 5th is the first Saturday in August. Hopefully you're not already back to school by then. Hopefully we can catch you like right before you go back into your school year and just like give you a ton of ideas and resources and templates and all kind of stuff that you can use when you go back to school. So that's the goal. So hopefully we see you there. 2023 has been an incredibly busy year. I underestimated how hard it is to have an elementary aged kid and then a baby at the same time, and also work full-time, and also have a spouse who works full-time plus has a whole other business on the side, and then I have my other stuff on the side, and it's just been a really busy year. So this has not been much of a reading year for me. Let me check my Goodreads. I started using Goodreads again finally. I don't know, I just didn't even have time to write it in my little journal anymore. This is a really nice way to keep track of it. So, okay, I've read 18 books this year. My goal was 25, so like 2 a month-ish, and I've pretty much stuck to that. I've gone a little bit faster than that, but that's about all the time that I can carve out for myself. Okay, so what I think we'll do is my 5 favorite books of the year and my 3 least favorite books of the year, because I couldn't pick only 3 that were my favorite, and I really couldn't pick 5 that were my least favorite. So we're gonna lean heavy on the positive side. What should we start with? Should we start with the worst? Yeah, it would be kind of a bummer to like end on the worst. So let's start with my 3 least favorite. Okay, I'm gonna say that one of my least favorite books of 2023 was the first book that I read this year. I read In the Distance by Hernan Diaz because I had just read Trust, which I thought was amazing. I could understand people not liking it, but like if you stick with it, what he does in that book is just so different and so masterful and just like really intriguing to me. It kind of reminds me a little bit of Hari Kunzru, who's one of my favorite authors of all time. So I was like, ooh, maybe I'm getting into like another Hari Kunzru situation. So I went back and read Hernan Diaz's first book, In the Distance, and I wanted so badly to like it. He is a great writer. This book is well written. It was just hard for me to get into, and I understand what he's doing. So the book is about this guy who's from Sweden, I think, and he's like huge. He's like a giant man, and there's no work in Sweden, so his parents send him and his brother to New York, but they don't speak any English, and he gets separated from his brother and ends up on the West Coast, like ends up in California. And then throughout the book, this is during like the time of the gold rush in the West, he is traveling like all over the Southwest, but he doesn't know enough about geography and doesn't know enough English, and like, you know, states weren't even sectioned off and stuff by then, so you never know where he is really. He's just kind of like traveling like back and forth around the Southwest. So the whole story has just like a lot of tension because he never knows where he is, and you never know where he is, and you never get like a sense of place. Yet at the same time, like the setting is so important because it's so harsh, and everything about the environment that he's in has everything to do with the plot and like what happens next and everything. So it's really interesting, and it kind of gave me like the idea for tracking my reading based on geography this year. So I've just been putting the covers of the books that I've read on like a little map this year. So I have like a US map and then a map of the world, and I've been trying to kind of just like read things from different places, like set in different places. So it did give me the idea to do that, but it was just hard for me. I just couldn't, it was just too frustrating to like never know where he was, and it doesn't have like a very happy ending. So it's a good book, but it's one of my least favorite of 2023. Sorry, Hernan Diaz. Okay, another one of my least favorite books of 2023, even though I could see why people like it and I don't necessarily like not recommend it, but it's called House of Cotton by Monica Brashears, and the cover was beautiful. So I was like, yeah, I just need to try this out. It was a little bit different from what I normally read. Like it kind of has like that gothic side to it. It's set during pretty much modern day. Yeah, she's on Tinder a lot, so it's set now. And it's about a girl who's like 19. She lives in Tennessee. She has no connections whatsoever, which is just like a little bit hard to believe. Like her mother has passed away, so there's magical realism mixed into this book, which I always like. That aspect of it was cool. But she has like no friends, no connections, and I guess like she wants it that way, but her mom dies and she needs some money. She ends up working for this kind of like weird funeral home type thing, and it's very creepy. The type of work that she has to do is very creepy, and the plot and like the character herself kind of reminds me of the book Luster, or maybe Such a Fun Age, and I loved Such a Fun Age. And the things that those books have in common, I think, is something like cathartic, where the black female lead is somebody who's kind of self-destructive. She doesn't have to be this like savior for everybody or be like so perfect that she rises above all of the hardship around her or whatever. These characters are just flawed and self-destructive. So I think there's something cathartic in like writing and reading those characters. But what I loved about like Such a Fun Age is that in writing the white characters, Kylie Reid shows us how observant black women have to be of white women and white families, just because they have to navigate them every day. And so the way that she writes the white family is like searing. It's unnerving almost for white people, right? Because you're like, oh my gosh, she totally nailed it. There's another one like this where she lives in like Harlem and she has like a brownstone, and then there's neighbors next door who are white and they're like remodeling the brownstone. That one's really good. I can't remember the name of it right now. But that's the thing that's so good about those ones, is the way that these Black women write the white characters and like the things that they say to the Black women and their interactions. And like as you read it, you're just like flayed open. So that's so good. But with this book, with House of Cotton, the two white characters are so weird. Like, you don't know anybody like them. They're not normal at all. They're supposed to be exaggerations, I guess, but it just doesn't really show you anything about society. I was thinking that it would. That's kind of like what the jacket promises, but I didn't think it was that good. Okay, the third one that I didn't like as much as I thought I would, and it pains me to say this, but I sometimes listen to memoirs. If I'm listening to a book, it's usually like a celebrity memoir. And so Tan France's memoir, Naturally Tan, it was like fairly enjoyable. It was interesting to learn. I think the most interesting part to me was how he like teamed up with like a Utah housewife influencer fashionista girl, and that was like how he got his first clothing company off the ground. Blogger is the word I was looking for. And just his life back in England and like the way that he meets his husband, and his life story is really, really interesting. I didn't like love the way that it was structured. I feel like the editing in that sense could have been better. And then when you listen to the audio, it's so obvious that like he recorded it and then certain sections they wanted to switch it out. So then it sounded like he just re-recorded it into his phone and did like a voice memo, and then they just like stuck that in, because you can blatantly hear the difference between some of the sections. And it's, to me, that just like really took me out of it every single time. I was just like, ugh. So mostly because of that, because the sound quality is really bad on the audiobook, that's going to be my other least favorite of the year. Okay, for my 5 favorites of the year, one of my favorites was Age of Vice by Deepti Kapoor. It's set in like northern India, and as you read it, you get a better sense of the geography of India and like where these different cities are, and then kind of like the other, I don't know if they're called like provinces, but there's a lot of like, it's kind of like gangster influences, like mob bosses, and they have certain territory. And so you learn about the different areas of northern India through that. It's a little bit of a murder mystery. There is like a mystery that just like snakes through the whole entire plot. And it's a really long book. It's like almost 500 pages, but it's just such an interesting look at like what life is like in modern day India, especially for like the super rich, but then that's juxtaposed with the people who work for them, these decidedly non-rich people who kind of like make the wheels turn for the really rich people. And then there's also some issues of like caste and how certain people have advantages in that way. And I learned so much from the book, and it was so interesting, so well paced. Even though it's really long, you probably finish it in just a couple of days. So that's definitely one of my top reads of 2023. Another really long, kind of like epic of a story that was really, really great, and this is going to be on everybody's list this year, I think, but Demon Copperhead by Barbara Kingsolver. And one thing to keep in mind about this book is that it's a retelling of David Copperfield. So that's why it's so long. That's why it's so depressing. So it's, based on this Charles Dickens book, but it's set in Virginia, and there's this boy whose mom is kind of like in and out of rehab. His dad died when he was little. He lives in a bunch of different foster homes and stuff like that, and it's like all horrible. Like everything that happens to him is just awful, and you just want to take care of him, and you feel so bad for him. He's like a really good football player. That's kind of like his one saving grace, but he has an injury that takes that plus so much more away from him. And this book is ultimately about the opioid epidemic in places like Virginia and these small towns. And it also just has a lot to say about like, this character thinks a lot about like country people versus city people and the like unique problems that each of them have, but then like the unique advantages that each of them has. He's also half Melungeon, which is something that I hadn't heard of before, but if you're from the South, maybe particularly like the Virginia area, then you might know what that is. So if you read this book, you'll learn a little bit more about that. And it's just so engrossing, so good. I can't wait to hear like other people talk about this. I know at the end of the year when everyone does their like best books of 2023, this is going to be on everybody's list. Another amazing book of 2023, or at least that I read in 2023, is True Biz by Sarah Novick. This is a story set in Ohio. So, I've got all of these on my little map. And this one is about different kids and the principal of a school for the deaf in Ohio. So it's like a boarding school, basically. Like kids live there, at least during the week. Some of them go home on the weekends. But the way that it's done is just so interesting. Like all of the chapter titles have the sign language symbol for like the name of whoever's perspective it's through at that time, and there are a bunch of pages with illustrations like showing how to sign different things. The principal is teaching a course on deaf history, and so you get to see like her lesson plans and learn a whole bunch of things about the history of like ASL and then like BSL, Black Sign Language, and just so many things that I never knew before. And it inspired me to take a sign language class. So I'm taking a sign language class this summer online with Adventures in Deaf Ed. I'll leave that information down below. And yeah, like this has maybe been the most like transformative book that I read this year. And I really want to find a way to incorporate more deaf history into the courses that I teach, and more like disability theory and disability studies into my English classes, and read more stories like this because it was so good and just one that I think everybody should read. And for most of these, maybe all the ones I mentioned so far, just kind of like when I feel like it, I've been making little reels of me reading these books. I took a lot of the pressure off of myself this year with my reading, so I set like a much lower goal. I don't make my monthly reading recaps anymore. I've just been having fun with my little like map thing. And then if I have time, if I feel like it, I make a little reel where I just kind of show you like inside the book a little bit so you get a better sense of whether or not you want to read it. So I know I have one for that one, for True Biz. So check that out on Instagram just to see like all of the really cool features of the book, and I'll bet you'll want to read it. Okay, the next one I know did not come out in 2023, but so many people have recommended it to me. I think it was last year I read quite a bit of Frederick Bachman's books, and so many people recommended the Beartown series. So I read the first one in the series called Beartown. It's set in Sweden in the fictional town of Beartown. And I really love how Frederick Bachman just like, he brings in so many just like truths about life. And so there are like quite a few little like cliches and things in the book, in like all of his books, but they work. That's just it. It's fine. It just works. And he always writes from like so many different perspectives. And then at the beginning of all of his books, you're always kind of wondering like, okay, how are each of these individual stories and these individual people interconnected? So sometimes it takes a little while to get into the plot, but pretty soon they just like are braided together and you're like, oh my goodness, I need to see where this all leads. So for Beartown, there's definitely a trigger warning for a rape. I think that's just like on the back of the book. I don't think that's really a spoiler, but that is something that is explored from the different perspectives of like all the people who are trying to deal with this, and like who should be punished and what is the, collateral damage in a town where hockey players usually get to do whatever they want. So it says a lot about like sports and toxic masculinity and, what brings small towns together and what's actually like stable in those communities. So yeah, it's really, really good. I have the second one right now. It's called Us Versus Them. And I'm still in that stage where it's like a little hard to get into it because it keeps going to all these different people and I'm just like waiting for it to come together. And then my number 5, a top book so far of 2023, is Conjure Women. I just posted a reel about this today, so that will be on my Instagram, but this one is set in the South and it never specifies the state. I was thinking about like why she would choose to do that. Maybe for the enslaved people there, it just kind of like doesn't matter what state they're actually in because they're in the South. Like there's definitely a division between the North and the South because there are two timelines, and one of the timelines is like leading up to the Civil War, and then the other timeline is right after the Civil War, and the chapters alternate between the two. So what matters most is that they are just part of the South. So I'm just kind of guessing that that's why they never specify the state, because maybe it just doesn't matter to the enslaved people, or they may not even know. Maybe just nobody tells them like what state they live in. But it's really about like the connections between the women on the plantation, mostly the women who are enslaved, but then also the Master Charles, they call him. He has a daughter, and it takes so many women to take care of this one girl who's in the big house, you know. So there's a woman who's like a healer, and so, you know, she has to like bring her into the world and take care of anybody who's sick. And then she also has a daughter who's like the main character of the book. Her name's Rue, and she kind of takes over as the healer later on. And then there is a woman who's kind of like the nanny, and then the girls like Rue and a few others who like play with this girl when she's little, and then like help her get dressed and do her hair and stuff as she grows older. And her life, the white girl, her name's Verena, her life is so interconnected with all of these other Black women. Some of them, you know, may even be her half sisters. So she's not in any way like separate from them. Like she relies on them for like every single thing that happens in her entire day. And then outside of like the big house, these women rely on each other. They need each other, but they don't necessarily like each other. They don't all necessarily get along, and it's a very unstable environment. You just like, they don't have any choices about like whether or not they're staying there, or whether or not they get to keep their own children, or who they're gonna be with and have children with. So then that's really juxtaposed with this time period right after the Civil War ends, and they are making decisions. Like that is kind of the theme of that period of time. They get to decide where they're gonna live. Are they gonna go north, or are they gonna stay here? They get to decide who they're gonna marry. They get to decide if they wanna have children, when they wanna have children. They get to decide if they want religion and how they want that religion to look. And I can't believe this is the author's debut novel. Like, it seems like she's been writing for decades and decades. It's so well done. There are a lot of questions that are like brought up at the beginning of the book that you're like, oh, maybe she forgot about this, and it's like there's not enough time for that to get answered by the end of the book. But she ties up everything. So every single thing that you're wondering about through the book, it will be answered by the end. Like no detail is left unattended, and it's just so masterfully done. And this is my favorite type of book. It's historical fiction mixed with magical realism, and it's just like this one may be the best. It's freshest in my mind, but at the moment it's at the top of my list. Currently I'm reading these three. I always have like multiple books that I'm reading at once. I have like one in my classroom, one in my car, one in the living room, like just so wherever I am I have one. So this is the Us Against You. I'm on chapter 12, so I'm not super far into this one. And this is another one that I started like quite a while ago. It was one of the Amory's book club picks. I've been really slacking on those this year. I haven't done a good job keeping up with those like I usually do. It's called If I Survive You. Man, I'm only on page 50, but it feels like I read so much of it. The author is Jamaican. It's set in Florida, and then he goes away to college somewhere in the Midwest. I forget where exactly, but I think he ends up back in Florida and sometimes in Jamaica. This is gonna be a hard one to put on my map. But I'm trying to finish this one. It's really not that long, but it's taking me forever. And then last night I started this one called Kairos, and it's set in Berlin. It's originally written in German, and then this is a English translation. Started it last night. I'm only 27 pages in, but oh my goodness, it's so good. This is probably the one I'm gonna like be reading mostly, and then I'll get back to these two, but this one's amazing. So I've got Germany, Sweden, and then Jamaica, Florida, Midwest. At the moment, I'm looking at my map. I don't have a Texas, California, any of the like full-on West Coast. I've got nothing over there, none of like the Dakotas, the Colorado area. I don't have any books from those geographical areas, so give me some suggestions if you know of some that are set in those areas that I would really like. I just thought it'd be fun this year to kind of spread out my settings of my books. Anyway, it's time to get back to work on my Brave History Conference stuff. I hope that I will see you there on August 5th. And I hope you're having a great summer. Happy reading. Bye.